Emily Thompson, a dedicated social worker in her early 30s, had always been driven by a desire to make a difference. Her days were filled with counseling sessions, outreach programs, and navigating the intricate web of the city's social services. Yet, despite the challenges, she found solace in her evening walks through Central Park, a brief respite from the demands of her profession. One crisp autumn evening, as golden leaves carpeted the pathways, Emily's attention was drawn to a figure huddled on a bench. His clothes were tattered, hair disheveled, and eyes reflecting a depth of sorrow that resonated with her empathetic heart. Approaching cautiously, she offered a warm smile. "Good evening. Mind if I sit?" she asked gently. The man glanced up, surprise flickering across his features, and nodded. "I'm Emily," she introduced herself, extending a gloved hand. He hesitated before shaking it. "James," he replied, his voice hoarse. Over the next few weeks, Emily made it a point to visit James during her evening walks. She learned that he had been living on the streets for over a year, each day a struggle for survival. Despite his circumstances, James possessed a quiet dignity and an articulate manner that intrigued her. "How did you end up here, if you don't mind me asking?" Emily inquired one evening. James sighed, gazing at the horizon. "Life has a way of unraveling when you least expect it," he began. "I lost my job, then my home. One thing led to another, and here I am." Determined to assist, Emily connected James with a local shelter and helped him enroll in a job training program. She discovered that he had a background in finance, which made his current predicament all the more perplexing. "Why didn't you reach out for help earlier?" she asked during one of their conversations. James shrugged. "Pride, perhaps. Or maybe I just didn't think anyone would care." As James began to rebuild his life, fragments of his past started to surface. Emily learned that he had once been a successful investment banker with a promising career. However, a series of personal tragedies, including the sudden death of his wife, had sent him into a downward spiral. "Grief can be a powerful adversary," James reflected somberly. "It blindsided me, and before I knew it, everything I valued was gone." Months passed, and James secured a job at a financial consulting firm. His transformation was remarkable, and Emily couldn't have been prouder. One evening, as they sat in a cozy cafe, James slid a newspaper across the table. "Recognize anyone?" he asked, a hint of mischief in his eyes. Emily glanced at the article, her eyes widening in astonishment. The headline read, "Former finance mogul Jonathan Edwards resurfaces after mysterious disappearance." The accompanying photo was unmistakably James. "You're Jonathan Edwards?" she exclaimed. He nodded, a sheepish smile playing on his lips. "I changed my name after everything fell apart. I wanted to escape my past, but it seems the past has a way of catching up." Emily was stunned. She had read about Jonathan Edwards years ago, a financial prodigy who had vanished without a trace. The revelation added a new layer to their relationship, but it didn't change the essence of who James was to her. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked softly. James sighed. "I wanted to be seen for who I am now, not who I was. The world judges based on labels, and I needed to find myself without the weight of my former identity." With his true identity revealed, James faced a media frenzy. Reporters clamored for interviews, and former colleagues reached out, expressing shock and curiosity. Through it all, Emily remained by his side, offering unwavering support. "What's next for you?" she asked one evening as they strolled through the park where they had first met. James smiled thoughtfully. "I want to use my experiences to help others, those who've fallen through the cracks, just as I did. Perhaps start a foundation focused on mental health and homelessness." True to his word, James established the Second Chance Foundation, dedicating resources to support individuals facing homelessness and mental health challenges. Emily joined him in this endeavor, and together, they worked tirelessly to make a difference. Their journey was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of compassion. In helping a homeless man, Emily had discovered a friend, a partner, and a shared purpose. And in accepting help, James had reclaimed his identity, not as the fallen mogul, but as a beacon of hope for others. Years later, as they stood at the inauguration of a new shelter funded by their foundation, Emily reflected on the serendipitous encounter that had changed both their lives. "Do you ever think about that first evening?" she asked, smiling up at James. He chuckled. "Every day. It reminds me that even in our darkest moments, a simple act of kindness can light the way." And so, amidst the ever-turning wheels of New York City, their story stood as a luminous example of empathy, redemption, and the power of second chances. As they stepped off the podium, Surrounded by applause and the flashing of cameras, Emily and James exchanged a knowing glance. This was just the beginning. The Second Chance Foundation quickly gained traction. News outlets picked up the incredible story of the former finance mogul who had once lived on the streets and was now leading a movement to combat homelessness. Donations poured in. Volunteers signed up. And perhaps most importantly, stories like James's began to surface. People who had lost everything, finding their way back through kindness and support. One evening, Emily and James sat in his modest office, reviewing case files of people seeking help. "Look at this," Emily said, handing him a letter. James adjusted his reading glasses and scanned the neatly written words. "Mr. Edwards, I don't know if you remember me, but I was one of the many people who walked past you when you were on that park bench. I never stopped to help, and I regret it deeply. Your story has changed the way I see the world. I've started volunteering at a local shelter, and for the first time, I feel like I'm making a difference. Thank you for opening my eyes." James set the letter down, taking a deep breath. "I used to think my story ended when I lost everything. I never imagined it would inspire someone else to start a new chapter of their own." Emily smiled. "That's the ripple effect. You never know how far one act of kindness can go." As successful as the foundation was, not everyone welcomed their efforts. James's former business rivals, skeptical politicians, and even some members of the public questioned his sincerity. "Why should we trust a man who disappeared when things got tough?" a reporter asked during a press conference. James didn't flinch. "Because I've lived through what so many people fear, losing everything. And I know that it's not about how far you fall, but about whether someone is there to help you stand up again." Despite the scrutiny, the work continued. One of their biggest initiatives was a transitional housing program aimed at providing not just shelter but career training, counseling, and a pathway back to independence. "This isn't charity," Emily emphasized in a television interview. "It's an investment in human potential." One day, an unexpected visitor arrived at the foundation's headquarters. A man in a tailored suit, carrying an expensive leather briefcase, stood at the front desk, nervously adjusting his tie. Emily approached him. "Can I help you?" The man cleared his throat. I need to see James. My name is Richard Edwards. I'm his brother." Emily's eyes widened. James had never mentioned a brother. When she led Richard to James's office, the tension was palpable. James stood frozen, staring at the man he hadn't seen in years. "You're alive," Richard finally whispered. James exhaled slowly. "I am." A long silence stretched between them before Richard spoke again. "Why didn't you come home?" James shook his head. "I wasn't the same person anymore. I didn't know how to face you after everything fell apart." Richard's voice wavered. "We searched for you. Mom died not knowing where you were." James closed his eyes, pain washing over his features. "I know," he murmured. "I read about it in the papers. I wanted to call, but I didn't know if I still had a place in your lives." Richard stepped forward. "You were my brother then, and you're my brother now. I don't care about the past. I just want to know, are you happy?" James swallowed the lump in his throat and nodded. "I finally am." The two brothers embraced, years of pain and distance melting away in that moment. A year later, the Second Chance Foundation expanded nationwide. Emily and James traveled across the country, advocating for better policies, opening new shelters, and sharing their message of resilience. During a gala fundraiser in Washington, D.C., James stood before an audience of philanthropists, lawmakers, and former homeless individuals who had rebuilt their lives through the foundation's programs. "I once believed that losing everything meant losing myself," he said, his voice steady. "But one person, one act of kindness, showed me that I was still worth saving. We are here tonight because every life has value. Every person deserves a second chance." The crowd erupted in applause, but James's eyes found Emily's. She nodded, pride shining in her expression. After the event, as they walked through the quiet streets of D.C., Emily nudged him. "You know, when I first sat down next to you on that park bench, I had no idea what I was getting into." James laughed. "Neither did I. But I'm glad you did." She grinned. "So, what's next?" James looked up at the night sky, a sense of peace settling over him. "We keep going. We help more people. And maybe, just maybe, we change the world." If this story moved you, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories. Share this with someone who needs a little inspiration today.